Welcome to Out of the Lab, a podcast interviewing entrepreneurs who've taken research out of the lab and built it into a company that's serving the world. These entrepreneurs are heroes, and the planet needs more of them. So tune in, learn from their successes and failures, and get inspired. Visit bountiful.org to join our community and realize your power to save the world. Hello and welcome to Out of the Lab. I'm your host, Max Finder. Today's guest is Dr. Iris Good. Iris is a scientist, entrepreneur, and investor specializing in the commercialization of medical devices. She has a hugely successful career. She did a PhD in biochemistry from the Weizmann Institute. She has 2 postdocs in molecular biology and brain research. And then she really started to focus on technology commercialization, especially in international markets, and really specializing in bringing technologies to India. She's developed a bunch of different companies. One of them has been acquired, and she is extremely impressive. She's also now the chair of the Imperial Innovations Seed Fund at the London Business School, UCL. And she is also on the investment committee of Cambridge University Seed Fund. So these are 2 major universities in the UK. And she's also the chairwoman of Good Relations India, which has taken tons and tons of technology companies to India. They have clients like Apple, Barclays, Bloomberg, Cartier, the UN, Virgin. The list goes on and on. We talk all about her career, and we talk about advice she would give to entrepreneurs. She talks about what entrepreneurs, characteristics of these successful university technology entrepreneurs and scientists are. She talks about what it takes to get these things out of the lab. She talks about lessons she's learned in her career, some of her failures. We talk about the Indian market a little bit, and it's just a really great conversation with such a successful person that has done a few different things that she's kind of brought together and used all for good. So commercializing really cool medical devices. She's an expert. So enjoy. Visit bountiful.org to get early access to our platform. And thank you for listening. Enjoy the episode. Hello, Iris. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Max. It's nice to be here.
So you have a pretty illustrious career from academic scientist through technology commercializer and now on the investing side. But I'd love to even go back to the beginning and hear a little bit about when you were doing your PhD and what you were interested in and what you were looking to do. I know you did a couple of postdocs, but maybe you could tell us, if you can, go back and think a bit about your headspace at that time, and then we can try to figure out how you ended up where you are today.
Yeah, no problem. I always wanted to do a PhD in biochemistry, as weird as it sounds. And at the Weizmann Institute in Israel, it was the best place then and probably now. And I didn't have any idea about commercialization or anything, but also biology. If you remember, it was a long time ago. The medtech didn't start until probably I finished my 2 postdocs, so I was quite lucky. But during my studies, there wasn't much work but being a technician at the lab, but I just loved biology and I went with my heart. And then things opened up and a new industry emerged, and it was really exciting, although we didn't know anything about it and it felt like defecting the academic world. But I took the chance. I wanted to make things happen and to see them happening rather than having a very basic research that would last dozens of years, with all the respect to it. And that's how I moved to the industry after the 2 postdocs I did. Yeah.
So what was the first? I mean, you got involved you started a medical device technology company after your postdocs?
Yes. So actually, I went from doing master's and PhD in the same, and actually the first postdoc that I did was in sort of the same area. And then I moved to brain research, and I heard somebody saying in one of the conferences 25 years ago when I started, and the whole study he did was whether a certain protein turns to the right or to the left, cis or trans it's called. And I thought, you know, I want to do something much more hands-on. And so I first joined a company called Angiosonics. It doesn't exist anymore. And I worked, and it was a medical device company, luckily. And I loved the multidisciplinary aspect of it. So instead of just biology way of thinking, I had to think about computer science and mechanics and design and physics. It was also in ultrasound. So it gave me a totally different way of thinking. And then I co-established UltraShape, which was a high-intensity ultrasound device for fat emulsification, with two co-founders. And it looked just a normal way forward, if you see it, I mean.
And so this was not an academic spin out. It was something that you and your partners invented and developed and then built into a startup company.
Right. So they had the idea and they had space and money for a year. And they said, why won't you come and let's co-found everything together. And I thought, you know, we have money for 1 year. I learned a little bit the area, definitely not as much as I would have learned, studied it today. But I thought, you know, 1 year, I will make it. I was optimistic and I thought, yes, we will make it. And I didn't know how difficult it is, but we did make it. And I think it's not, I mean, so many startups start with this huge doubt, but it's perseverance that you need. Most of all, you need a good idea, you need something that the market needs, and there is a long list or rather a focused list of requirements that you really need to have in order to have a good starting point. But besides that, you need to be able to dust yourself each time and keep on and look for other reasons. Listen to what the market says, what others tell you, judge it and change a little bit or just persevere.
We'll get. I have a bunch of questions actually especially about your the trajectory of your career, but this focus list of requirements piqued my interest. I mean, what are some of those other things that you think are so critical to deciding whether a technology, especially a nascent technology that you might find in a university lab, are critical to a startup? You know, or are the make or no, or the go or no go kind of things on the startup list?
Yeah, so I will not say it in a very orderly manner, because I will tell you the list. First of all, probably the most important thing is, does the market need it? The fact that you like it doesn't mean that others would like it. So who's going to pay for it and why? I read a nice phrase that I use. It's you create the technology for your clients rather than you create a technology and then look for clients. Yeah. So you have to think, who is it? What is the gap that my technology will be so important to fill? So that's number one. Then
just on that, I really like the way to say of sell first and build second, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
And for this you have, yes, Max, no, absolutely right. And for this, you've got to really understand the market. So if it is something that, you know, I keep telling people, go around when you walk, think about the world and think constantly how you can make it better. So it's in everything, you know, you see a queue in wherever it is, you think, oh, I could have created a software to work on the queues. You see pricing that is not changing properly, so you can. So these are, it's a good thinking practice or training. But when you have this idea and you think, gosh, this is exactly what the world needs, then you have to start asking around, am I right? Is it really the next big thing? So you have to ask the right people, and this is called market research, right? You have to ask, am I correct in thinking that this is the next big thing? This is really required. And for this, you have to understand who your market is, who you're going to sell it to. Do I know people through LinkedIn or through personal connections? Do I know these people that could give me 10 minutes of their time just to talk about it and to see whether I'm at all in the right place? Once you think that you are, you also want to see that the market size is big enough, because you will have a small chunk, definitely at the beginning. So if the market size is a niche one, you have to think how you will become profitable. And maybe you want to be a charity, but even a charity needs to be profitable and then burn the money and then keep, you have to have some income even for a charity. It just zeros at the end of the year. But so you need to understand that you have a market, and sizable market to start with. So when I judge technologies, I always look at what market size they have. It's called the total market, market TAM, and then the specific market, the SAM, of which they think they could be, they could sell to, they could become a player. Then you need to ask yourself, is my technology strong enough? How long does it take me to create it? If it's 3 months, for example, in software or others, why would people pay for this? I mean, 3 months, I had a technology, somebody that came, a nice one in software, and it took them 3 months, and 3 months everybody can make, and definitely the big companies that may think to acquire them. So you need to see that you have some substance there, something IP, preferably, or know-how that is your unique advantage. So if you have the market size and you have the technology, and of course you have internal knowledge as a team, you have to ask yourself then, what is my way forward? What do I do from now onward? What sort of money do I need? How do I raise money? How do I package it into a product? And I can go on and on with many other things that you need, and I will probably remember other things that I didn't mention now, but generally speaking, these are the good starting points.
No, and that's a good list. And so are these things that you learned on the way? Like, can you talk about maybe even some of the failures that you experienced in commercializing
Sure.
technology, and some of the lessons that you learned that have helped you arrive at some of these insights today?
Yes, of course, lots of failures. And somebody wiser than me once said, as long as I make more right decisions than wrong decisions, I'm pretty okay. So that's the way I look at it. We all have more failures than successes. Otherwise, success wouldn't be so unique. But I remember trying to fundraise for a company called Touchlight Genetics. It's a company still existing, doing fantastically well. I'm talking about 15 years ago. We created a DNA amplification cassette, like a system. And in the days that nobody spoke about DNA vaccines or messenger RNA vaccines like we have now for COVID. And it was generations too early to the world. And it was so difficult to get the first funding. We raised £5 million. It's a UK company. And I remember that we were struggling to explain it in a way that anybody would understand. And we made I think the first 2 months of our fundraise was a total failure because people simply didn't get what we were trying to tell them. So we paused and we tried to work out our speech, you know, our presentation to people that knew nothing in biology, because a lot of those investors are very clever in one area, but not necessarily in biology. And that's where I learned that you have to become a good storyteller. You know, don't think that what you understand, everybody understands. Cut it to chewable size pieces and provide your potential investor with understanding. If he doesn't understand, he will not put his hand into the pocket and write a check. So that's one thing I learned.
So this idea of being able to concisely tell a story is extremely useful, especially for scientists, I guess, who in a lot of cases like to get into the details and are very excited about the complex nature of their scientific inventions and discoveries, but being able to really narrow that down and concisely tell a story is definitely a skill that they should learn.
It's crucial, I think. Yeah.
And so in your capacity, I mean, you're on the chair of the Cambridge, Cambridge
Yes.
Investment Committee and the chair of the Imperial Innovations Seed Fund. I mean, you see a lot of these scientific startups and stuff. What are some of the good storytelling is one, I guess. I mean, what are some of the other unifying characteristics that some of these startups that come in front of you have?
Yes, just to correct that I chair the Imperial College Seed Fund, and I am a member of the
investment
Seed Fund. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, we see dozens of companies, and probably I read hundreds of business plans every year, and I think that you judge the technology, you judge what competes with this technology, you judge the team at this time of investment when it is early stage. The team is crucial. You look at these people, young, very brilliant people, and you ask yourself, could they climb a wall together? Because they will get, sooner or later, they will get to a wall. And things will not work as they think. And you ask yourself, are they resilient? Do they listen? Do they have the technology capacity? Can the CEO lead? It's not enough to manage. You need to lead. Can he really lead people behind him, both internally and externally, like investors and collaborations? These are important things, and you get the vibe. You ask a question, is he defensive or is he listening and comfortable to say, well, that's a very good point. We should factor it in. It's okay not to know everything at this stage. I also look at these entrepreneurs and I ask myself, do they dream big? That's one side. I like big dreamers. On the other side, I ask myself, do they have feet on the ground? Are they naive in their projections and too optimistic? Or did they factor in plan B or plan C sometimes if things don't happen? So you need a range. It sounds like impossible, but it is possible. It just, it's a fine line between promising too much and dreaming too little.
And so some of these entrepreneurs in science, I mean, what is the ideal, is there an ideal combination of these types of people? Like for a lot of so if we take a step back, I mean, these seed funds at the universities in the UK are some of the most successful in the world, right? I mean, I wonder if you could tell us a bit why you think that is. Yeah, and I'd love to hear more about, some of these ideal combinations of scientist and entrepreneur. Is the inventor often the leader of the company? Is the grad student involved? I mean, what are some of the things that you've seen that work the best, maybe?
Yeah. So I think these are very successful because of several things. I think I can speak for both Imperial and Cambridge. They are very knowledgeable, but also friendly TTOs, technology transfer officers. We are on the same side, and our teams on the same side of the companies. Once we shortlist them, and we work a lot on the pipeline, looking at the pipeline and looking at anything that could work. And then we put a lot of effort in preparing them to be what we call investment ready. Both the executive team on the ground and the investment committees, we spent quite a lot of time with the entrepreneurs, and we talk with them. All of them are very clever. They would know the technology very well, but not all of them are commercial enough. So we help them become more commercial by asking questions. We have what we call pre-investment committee meetings when they're partially ready. The executive teams sometimes work with them for 1 or 1.5 years, just preparing them, helping them with IP, helping them understanding the market. Of course, they don't do the work for them, but they act as mentors. And I think mentorship is really important for entrepreneurs. Not all the entrepreneurs are very young. You mentioned that some of them could be professors that have developed the technology for 7-10 years, and they just don't bother that much or don't know how to commercial it. They have their own job and they don't have the drive of commercialization. So many times you're right that a postdoc or a PhD student would help them with the process because he or she would be enthusiastic to do so. And so that's where we come and we help them shape it, we help them understand it, we help them look into the business plan in a better way. And when they become investment ready, we gather the investment committee, and we believe that, and the industry shows it, that if we did our due diligence and we said yes, then they're happy to co-invest with us.
And investment ready, I mean, that's some of, checking those boxes, I guess, about, TAM and, the market size, I guess, and the potential strategy. I mean, are there other things that are requirements in order to get something to investment ready? I guess I'm very interested, Iris, in the trajectory from university invention in some professor's lab all the way up to investment ready for Imperial Seed Fund to take this thing to the next level.
Yeah. So I will tell you one thing that I see over and over again with a lot of the teams is that they don't ask for enough money. It sounds like a funny problem to have, but it's something that repeats itself. Obviously, they are optimistic, otherwise they wouldn't be entrepreneurs. And also naive because they haven't done it before. They think that things will work out, and they look at what is the minimum money I need to get to the next stage, which makes sense in many ways. But I always say, and it's nearly repeating itself, that I would ask, why don't you raise more? Or if you raised more, and this would be maybe a good take-home message. If you raised more, would your time to market be shorter? If the answer is yes, rethink, because time to market is one aspect that doesn't get into business plans. It doesn't have a number, but it's such a crucial aspect of development. and you don't want to get to your next stage without enough fuel. So you have to work backwards. Let's say that you want £2 million, or let's say 500,000, just to be in better, numbers that people would feel more comfortable with. But the milestone, it will only get you to the milestone which you need for the next investment, which happens so many times. But then you will need another 3 to 6 months to raise the next investment. So your milestone needs to be really 6 months before the money ends. Although it sounds so trivial, many people don't think this way.
And that's something that you help these entrepreneurs and scientists do, is part of the mentorship that you do.
Yeah. Many times we would send them back saying, think about it, come back to us in 2 weeks, in a month, and revise it, because you will need more money. You will fall here and here. These places are very high risk. Your technology is not ready yet. What happens if so and so? Your manufacturing may not be as straightforward. Definitely now with COVID changes the timelines of clinical trials, because not much is happening outside of COVID in hospitals. So all sorts of aspects that may affect the burn rate and the time to get to the results.
And so if we take a step back, I'm curious now I'm back to the list of questions that I had. If we think about, do you feel, I know you interact with PhDs and postdocs and stuff. Do you think that things have changed in academia and and you can take this however you like, but since you were a PhD and postdoc, have things changed in academia?
I think that academics accept that commercialization could be a good thing, and in some universities it's even a prestigious thing. When I was a PhD student, it was void around and it was looked down at. So this is a good thing. Connecting the academia and industry is really crucial for the development of the world. So I think this is a good thing that happens, and I know that at Imperial we work quite extensively to talk to academics and to explain and to show them that it's a good way forward. I also think that more PhD and postdoc students know a thing or two about commercialization, and I think that universities should teach them. There is no reason why we shouldn't have a basic course in entrepreneurship and economics in every level, at entry level, at business school, at a master's, PhD, and postdoc. And that's something that I'm working towards at Imperial. I think that's going to, it's something for the students to keep in mind as they go along the various stages.
And so that's great, and I hope that more people, and you think it's happening. PhDs are getting more interested in commercialization. Inventing something and patenting something is a badge of it, is becoming more prestigious than simply publishing. So that's very good for the sector.
Yes, I agree. I think it is good for both, because it's not instead of science. Science will always be the basic of everything. But if science ends up in science, it's fantastic by itself, but it could be more, it could contribute more to the world and then back to the professor. So it should be looked at as a positive thing.
And at some point in your career, you were working in Shlomo ben Chaim's lab?
Ben Chaim, yeah.
And
well, it's not a lab, but he is a serial entrepreneur, and he had sort of an accelerator, a private accelerator, you could call it.
And what do you think makes him such a successful serial entrepreneur, commercializer of technology?
Well, he had to.
Or what was it like working in his lab as well? I mean, maybe you can speak about that. Not his lab, his accelerator.
Yes. He was very successful in selling 2 major technologies to Johnson & Johnson. The beginning of his career, he was a cardiologist, and he became very rich, a billionaire, nearly overnight, and well, within a short period of time. And luckily to the Israeli ecosystem, he set up this, I think it was 11 companies, all different technologies. I was involved with one of them, and then I helped him with a few others. It was fantastic because he had a very open view of how things should be, and if you came with the right ideas, you could, the sky was the limit. So I took one of his companies, it was called MetaCure, to India. We developed a device for the treatment of diabetes and obesity. It was very successful. Eventually, a few moves were not the right moves, and unfortunately it didn't commercialize fully. But that's the story of so many startups. Zigzagging or making the wrong move could be fatal, really.
Okay, and what would you say you learned from him, just or working in that experience?
I learned
or taking the technology to India.
Really, the sky's the limit, and that you can
to think big.
You can. I'm sorry. That the sky's the limit. You have to think big, and you have to not stop where others do. I'll give you an example. I had this medical device that was quite a complicated one. It was minimally invasive battery that was sutured to the stomach in 3 places, 2 in the fundus and 1 in the antrum, if people know the stomach. And we controlled diabetes through that, and also obesity. And I finished preclinical trials, and I tried to have first 2 in human. And this was something that was so needed, and I did believe that this could change the world. And I couldn't do it anywhere in Europe or in the States. Obviously, we didn't want to do anything illegal, but I wanted a place where the bar was a little lower. And then I found that in India, there were then over 50 million diabetics. And I thought, I need 2 out of 50 million. If I don't get that, I should retire. And luckily, I went to India, and I did find a doctor, a professor that for diabetes that was happy to try it on 2 of his patients, and we went through the Helsinki committee, and we got the first 2 in human. And then I saw how fantastic the scope of India is. And I thought, we can't just come and go. We should do something here, because India was the gateway to Asia, which was half of the population of diabetics in the world. So you cannot ignore that. So before I knew it, I set up 7 clinical centers there, and we developed, we opened commercial operations there. And so this is something that you can do when you have an open person as the chairman that has the means and encourages you to develop your idea or the device. It was great fun.
Yeah, that sounds like an amazing experience. And so This actually is a wonderful segue into the next topic I want to ask. I mean, so you have a lot of exposure to India. You're the chairperson of
Good Relations India.
Good Relation India, because the name changed. I'm sorry. So, you know, what do you think about science in India? Is it different? I mean, I feel like there are so many PhDs coming out of India right now. Maybe you could speak a little bit about science commercialization and academia in India.
Yeah. So India was, when I came first to India, it was year 2000. It was just about when India really opened to the world. It was amazing. I remember working in Chennai in the first year. I spent, for 3 years, I spent every other week in India. So I was exposed quite a lot to the Indian culture and to India as a whole. And I remember when I traveled from Chennai to Bombay, I flew in the morning flight sometimes. I was the only woman and the only foreigner on the airplane. Can you believe it? These were like 20 years ago. So India was just discovered big time by the world. Now, of course, you won't believe this. You know, it just looks. Bombay is so Western, and you will have so many foreigners there. But these days, it was much less. And I think the socioeconomic status was less, and people didn't dare risk their bread and butter. Indians are very entrepreneurial, so you can see it in every junction. You know, everybody from whichever caste, they will have an idea whether they will sell you something small or something bigger in their view. They will go and try. So when the money started coming in, and nowadays you have about 400 millions that are the affluent middle class in India, and you can see it because now in the last 5 to 10 years, you see more and more entrepreneurship, scientific one, and you will see it in many other areas. You will see it also in infrastructure, you will see it in restaurants. People think out of the box and they will go and do something. There is the money, the parents give the money to their children, they become a part of it, but there are also lots of technology and scientific entrepreneurship that becomes commercialized. They have accelerators, and they have some sponsorship from the government, but a lot of private investment as well.
And so you think we are bullish on India and the future of scientific breakthroughs coming out of India?
Yeah, I think that especially the one, you know, fintech is very strong in India. And there was a few years ago, there was a demonetization process where in 1 minute, people couldn't get cash because they changed the notes, and fintech became very strong. So from a population that was dominating by cash, they became much more open to digital payment, for example. So changes are made there, and sometimes they jump a generation. Like many of the Indians didn't have landline, but they have mobile phones. So they never had a landline. So these are the things that you would see, the things that are so different from the West, that people will jump. But the affluent middle class is bigger than the whole of the United States. They have a lot of money, a lot of buying power, and a lot of hunger. The youngsters are very proud Indians, and they do fantastic things there.
Do you think there are technology licensing opportunities in India, or I mean, can you speak a little bit about tech transfer in India?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. Well, I know a lot of private entrepreneurship. So people will just come with an idea and will do it. I assume there is also tech transfer. They have something called BIRAC, the Biotechnology Institute Association, maybe. It's called BIRAC, it's in Delhi, and they invest a certain amount of money in very early stage. We work with them also with Ignite, with Judge Business School in Cambridge, and they come to get trained, and they have conferences, etc. I suppose that this is more, it's more a private market rather than a technology transfer market. That would be my guess.
And in your experience now on the investment committees of these two, very successful funds in England, focusing on tech transfer investments, I mean, what do you think is happening in tech transfer? I know you mentioned that you're starting to advocate for teaching people at all levels courses in entrepreneurship and economics. I mean, are there other initiatives that you are leading or think that you guys will engage in soon that will change tech transfer? I mean, where do you think TTOs and tech transfer is heading in the next 5 or 10 years?
Yes, it's a good question. I think that when you look at the ideas, the pipeline will probably be dominant. The universities will dominate it for a very long time, because we're talking about mature pipeline that has been developed there over many, many years. The money is in the industry. Talk about VCs. And if I see the VCs on one side and the universities on the other side, there is a gap, a bridge that needs to be created between these two. And there is a lot of cultural differences between them. For example, VCs would look into the faster the technologies that could be commercialized faster. So software and lighter technologies would appeal more to VCs, while the heavy ones could be left behind, like any pharma, medical devices. And there is a gap there that needs to be treated. There are a few things that happen. There are VCs that are getting in touch. There are industry forums that are being created, because the university needs the industry and the industry needs the university. So big pharma companies would want to see the next big thing and maybe even invest, even for a first refusal at universities. So these are things that happen. Deep tech institutes are being built or set up, founded with government and other money involved. So this gap needs to be bridged somehow.
And what can the TTOs do to do their part in that?
TTOs need to be friendly enough and knowledgeable enough and supportive enough to buy into the faculties, that the faculty will buy into them, so that they can, the TTOs are in charge of the pipeline. They know the pipeline. They need to create the pipeline. Without the TTO, the pipeline is just lots of ideas that are not put into a pipeline, if you see what I mean. And once we put them together, we can also say, yes, this is good, but it will probably come in our next fund or next fund. So let's work on it, yeah? So if we have, for example, if we had a proof of concept fund, which would be before our fund, we could create this pipeline and eventually we will, we'll have just a very long train filled with ideas that can come to maturity in different times and can be directed successfully to investment and further development.
Yeah, that's something that David Allen from Tech Launch Arizona was speaking about on the most recent episode of our podcast, was the critical nature of proof of concept funding and how it's an initiative that can really improve a tech transfer's ability to get stuff out of the lab.
Yes, 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 exactly. I mean, we're currently working exactly on that. And we have a proof of concept fund within our fund in Cambridge, and it works fantastically. The team identifies up to 6 without even our involvement, and they work with them for maybe a year, sometimes a year and a half, as I mentioned before. And that's so important for these companies to do it without the pressure of real investment. It's a convertible loan, and it can take them a good way forward before we see them and we start, asking all the relevant questions. They are being asked these questions before, and they can prepare for them and mature with the development of the product.
And so if you had to give advice to some of these, young entrepreneurial scientists and grad students, and what would you say to them, whether from your own experience or, from whichever, tranche of your experience you want to draw on? I mean, you've done so much.
Thank you. I would say, be aware of your world. I remember being a PhD student and master's student, I was quite living in a bubble. I loved my research. I read so many research articles, but I knew, I don't want to say nothing, but close to nothing about the world. I wasn't connecting my world to the real world. I was in a bubble. Don't be in a bubble. Read the business sections of the papers. Read surveys. Look where industry goes. Think in an applied manner. Think about what you can do with your knowledge, your scientific knowledge. Can it help further besides writing an article, which is fantastic? I mean, in the bigger, in the prestigious papers, this is great. But sometimes you write the article, you lost the IP because it's prior art. So if you think in a commercial way, you would have a much bigger picture of what you can do with your idea. And some of the ideas can change the world. You would want to be one of them, one of these people changing the world, wouldn't you?
I think so. And if you had to give yourself advice on, again, any period of your career, I mean, just something looking back and what you would say to yourself, the young Dr. Iris Good.
Probably, I would say, be more confident. Yes, we can, I think my generation as a woman was different from the young women today. I was always very bullish and persistent, but I didn't think that I could do what I came to do. And the sky's the limit, as we said. And
did you experience a lot of sexism in your academic pursuits or business pursuits?
I think, again, without getting into details, I think that it was a much more male dominant world, and less women were there, and less women thought that they could. And I was a mother, and I remember even going to India. As I said, I spent every other week, and when I spoke to people, they said, "Oh, you have 2 daughters. Oh, poor them," in a normal discussion, in a normal business discussion. And that it's difficult. It's difficult being a mother and doing other things that you think are right. And the society as a whole doesn't help you. But you have to be just driven and believe in what you're doing and get it right. So I think it is easier for women now. Women can do, everybody can do without, it doesn't matter if it's a woman or a man, you just can do it. Just think big, look into what you need to, what are the things that you personally need in order to create this environment that can allow you to do it, and just go for it.
Iris, I think that's a wonderful place to stop. Where can people find you if they want to reach out? I mean, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
LinkedIn or?
LinkedIn is good.
LinkedIn good, yeah.
Yeah. We can link to it. We'll link to all of your, all of the various initiatives you're involved in. Think big. I mean, any other final words before we close out?
Well, I wanted to thank you, Max. You're doing a fantastic job encouraging young entrepreneurs. I think this is a brilliant thing to do. I wish you every success and your entrepreneurs, and good luck.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate it. Iris, thank you so much for joining. We'll include links in the show notes. That's the Out of the Lab podcast from bountiful.work. Sign up to get early access to our platform. And thanks everyone for joining. Thanks again, Iris.
Thank you. Bye-bye, Max.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. But now we need your help. We're building a community of scientists, students, entrepreneurs, industry leaders, and investors to commercialize meaningful technology and research. Join us at bountiful.work today to find opportunities and realize your power to save the world.